development, overgrazing, mining, unsustainable water use, nutrient pollution. Anthropogenic nitrogen inputs to aquatic systems have drastically affected dissolved nitrogen content of wetlands, introducing higher nutrient availability which leads to eutrophication. 71. Water pollution. They can be manifested partly as water scarcity, impacts to endangered species, disruption of wildlife breeding grounds, imbalance in sediment load and nutrient filtration. Biodiversity loss occurs in wetland systems through land use changes, habitat destruction, pollution, exploitation of resources, and invasive species. Vulnerable, threatened, and endangered species include 17% of waterfowl, 38% of freshwater dependent mammals, 33% of freshwater fish, 26% of freshwater amphibians, 72% of freshwater turtles, 86% of marine turtles, 43% of crocodilians and 27% of coral reef building species. Introduced aquatic plants in different wetland systems can have large impacts. The introduction of water hyacinth, a native plant of South America, into Lake Victoria in East Africa, as well as duckweed into non-native areas of Queensland, Australia, have overtaken entire wetland systems, overwhelming the habitats and reducing the diversity of native plants and animals. This is largely due to phenomenal growth rates of the plants and their ability to float and grow across the entire surface of future. Conversion to dry land. To increase economic productivity, wetlands are often converted into dry land with dikes and drains and used for agricultural purposes. The construction of dikes and dams has negative consequences for individual wetlands and entire watersheds. 1. 497. Their proximity to lakes and rivers means that they are often developed for human settlement. 72. Once settlements are constructed and protected by dikes, the settlements then become vulnerable to land subsidence and ever-increasing risk of flooding. 1. 497. The Mississippi River Delta around New Orleans, Louisiana is a well-known example. Winking sad smiley. 73. The Danube Delta in Europe is another. 74. Ecosystem services. Depending on a wetland's geographic and topographic location. 75. The functions it performs can support multiple ecosystem services, values, or benefits. United Nations Millennium Ecosystem Assessment and Ramsar Convention described wetlands as a whole to be of biosphere significance and societal importance in the following areas. Sad smiley. 76. Water storage, flood control, groundwater replenishment, shoreline stabilization and storm protection, water purification, wastewater treatment in constructed wetlands, reservoirs of biodiversity, pollination, wetland products, cultural values, recreation and tourism, climate change mitigation and adaptation. According to the Ramsar Convention, the economic worth of the ecosystem services provided to society by intact, naturally functioning wetlands is frequently much greater than the perceived benefits of converting them to more valuable intensive land use, particularly as the profits from unsustainable use often go to relatively few individuals or corporations, rather than being shared by society as a whole. Unless otherwise cited, ecosystem services information is based on the following series of references. 50. To replace these wetland ecosystem services, enormous amounts of money would need to be spent on water purification plants, dams, levees, and other hard infrastructure, and many of the services are impossible to replace. Storage reservoirs and flood protection. Floodplains and closed depression wetlands can provide the functions of storage reservoirs and flood protection. The wetland system of floodplains is formed from major rivers downstream from their headwaters. Floodplains of major rivers act as natural storage reservoirs, enabling excess water to spread out over a wide area, which reduces its depth and speed. Wetlands close to the headwaters of streams and rivers can slow down rainwater runoff and spring snowmelt so that it doesn't run straight off the land into watercourses. This can help prevent sudden, damaging floods downstream. 50. Notable river systems that produce wider floodplains include the Nile River, the Niger River Inland Delta, the Zambezi River Floodplain, the Okavango River Inland Delta, the Kaifu River Floodplain, the Lake Bangweulu Floodplain, Africa, Mississippi River, USA, Amazon River, South America, Yangtze River, China, Danube River, Central Europe, and Murray-Darling River, Australia. Drainage of floodplains or development activities that narrow floodplain corridors, such as the construction of levees, reduces the ability of coupled river floodplain systems to control flood damage. That is because modified and less expansive systems must still manage the same amount of precipitation, causing flood peaks to be higher or deeper and flood waters to travel faster. Water management engineering developments in the past century have degraded floodplain wetlands through the construction of artificial embankments such as dikes, bunds, levees, weirs, barrages and dams. All concentrate water into a main channel, and waters that historically spread slowly over a large, shallow area are concentrated. Loss of wetland floodplains results in more severe and damaging flooding. Catastrophic human impact in the Mississippi River floodplains was seen in death of several hundred individuals during a levee breach in New Orleans caused by Hurricane Katrina. Human-made embankments along the Yangtze River floodplains have caused the main channel of the river to become prone to more frequent and damaging flooding. 77. Some of these events include the loss of riparian vegetation, a 30% loss of the vegetation cover throughout the river's basin, a doubling of the percentage of land affected by soil erosion, and a reduction in reservoir capacity through siltation build-up in floodplain lakes. 50. Groundwater replenishment. Groundwater replenishment can be achieved, for example, by marsh, swamp, and subterranean karst and cave hydrological systems. The surface water visibly seen in wetlands only represents a portion of the overall water cycle, which also includes atmospheric water, precipitation, and groundwater. Many wetlands are directly linked to groundwater, and they can be a crucial regulator of both the quantity and quality of water found below the ground. Wetlands that have permeable substrates like limestone or occur in areas with highly variable and fluctuating water tables have especially important roles in groundwater replenishment or water recharge. 78. Substrates that are porous allow water to filter down through the soil and underlying rock into aquifers, which are the source of much of the world's drinking water. Wetlands can also act as recharge areas when the surrounding water table is low and as a discharge zone when it is high. Karst, cave systems are a unique example of this system and can be a connection of underground rivers influenced by rain and other forms of precipitation to the surface. Shoreline stabilization and storm protection. Mangroves, coral reefs, salt marsh can help with shoreline stabilization and storm protection. Tidal and intertidal wetland systems protect and stabilize coastal zones. 79. Coral reefs provide a protective barrier to coastal shoreline. Mangroves stabilize the coastal zone from the interior and will migrate with their shoreline to remain adjacent to the boundary of the water. The main conservation benefit these systems have against storms and storm surges is the ability to reduce the speed and height of waves and floodwaters. The number of people who live and work near the coast is expected to grow immensely over the next 50 years. From an estimated 200 million people that currently live in low-lying coastal regions, the development of urban coastal centers is projected to increase the population by fivefold within 50 years. 80. The United Kingdom has begun the concept of managed coastal realignment. This management technique provides shoreline protection through restoration of natural wetlands rather than through applied engineering. In East Asia, reclamation of coastal wetlands has resulted in widespread transformation of the coastal zone, and up to 65% of coastal wetlands have been destroyed by coastal development. 81. 82. 1. Analysis using the impact of hurricanes versus storm protection provided naturally by wetlands projected the value of this service at $33,000/hectare/year. 83. Water purification. Water purification can be provided by floodplains, closed depression wetlands, mudflat, freshwater marsh, salt marsh, mangroves. Nutrient retention. Wetlands cycle both sediments and nutrients, sometimes serving as buffers between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. A natural function of wetland vegetation is the uptake, storage, and, for a nitrate, the removal of nutrients found in runoff water from the surrounding landscapes. 84. In many wetlands, microbial processes convert soluble nutrients to a gaseous form, such as denitrification of nitrate, which then moves the nitrate to the atmosphere mostly as harmless nitrogen gas. Sediment and heavy metal traps. Precipitation and surface runoff induces soil erosion, transporting sediment in suspension into and through waterways. These sediments move towards larger and more sizable waterways through a natural process that moves water towards oceans. All types of sediments, whether composed of clay, silt, sand or gravel and rock, can be carried into wetland systems through erosion. Wetland vegetation acts as a physical barrier to slow water flow and then traps sediment for both short or long periods of time. Suspended sediment can contain heavy metals that are also retained wherein wetlands trap the sediment. In some cases, certain metals are taken up through wetland plant stems, roots and leaves. For example, many floating plant species such as water hyacinth, Eichhornia crassipes, duckweed, lemna, and water fern, azolla, store iron and copper found in wastewater. These plants also extract pathogens. Fast-growing plants rooted in the soils of wetlands such as cattail, typha, and reed, phragmites, also contribute to heavy metal uptake. Animals such as the oyster can filter more than 200 liters, 53 US gal, of water per day while grazing for food, removing nutrients, suspended sediments, and chemical contaminants in the process. On the other hand, some types of wetlands facilitate the mobilization and bioavailability of mercury, another heavy metal, which in its methylmercury form increases the risk of bioaccumulation in fish imported to animal food webs and harvested for human consumption. Capacity. The ability of wetland systems to store or remove nutrients and trap sediment and associated metals is highly efficient and effective, but each system has a threshold. An overabundance of nutrient input from fertilizer runoff, sewage effluent, or non-point pollution will cause eutrophication. Upstream erosion from deforestation can overwhelm wetlands, making them shrink in size and cause dramatic biodiversity loss through excessive sedimentation load. Retaining high levels of metals in sediments is problematic if these sediments become resuspended or oxygen and pH levels change at a future time. The capacity of wetland vegetation to store heavy metals depends on the particular metal, oxygen and pH status of wetland sediments and overlying water, water flow rate, detention time, wetland size, season, climate, type of plant and other factors. The capacity of a wetland to store sediment, nutrients, and metals can be diminished if sediments are compacted, such as by vehicles or heavy equipment, or are regularly tilled. Unnatural changes in water levels and water sources also can affect the water purification function. If water purification functions are impaired, excessive loads of nutrients enter waterways and cause eutrophication. This is of particular concern in temperate coastal systems. 85, 86. The main sources of coastal eutrophication are industrially made nitrogen, which is used as fertilizer in agricultural practices, as well as septic waste